Welcome to Sinful's Horror Stories. Sit back, relax, remain sinful. Story number 1. This happened when I was around 17 years old, and is still happening now. At 17, I felt lost in the world and stuck in a job I disliked, with work colleagues that didn't like me. This had to do with my accent, as I was quite well spoken, so they thought I was a rich kid. It all started on a Friday after work. The factory I worked in had a half day on Fridays, so I would just spend the rest of the day wandering around the city I lived in. It had been a tough day of relentless mocking, and I was reaching my breaking point. I went around the city looking for a new job. I visited the police recruitment center, the Army, Navy, and Air Force centers, and even in the International Red Cross. I just wanted to get away from it all. After a few hours, I had a bag full of career pamphlets and still no idea what to do with my life. I turned a corner and immediately saw a sign sitting right in front of me. I can remember it so vividly now. It said, "Free personality test. Are you curious about yourself? Come in." I then looked up at the building, and a big fancy sign outside it said, "The Church of Scientology." Now before I continue, yes, I already knew about Scientology. However, I had a morbid curiosity about it. I had heard of all the horror stories and goings-on inside the church, but Tom Cruise was my favorite actor. He seemed to have a life sorted out pretty well. My famous last words, right? So I went inside. I was immediately greeted by a very nice lady. She asked me how I was doing and what she could do for me today. I asked if I could speak to somebody about the church and the personality test. She smiled and said, "I would be happy to. Please take a seat and I will get someone to speak with you." After a minute, I was introduced to an older man named Alan, and he was the head of my city's Scientology center. Alan took me to a small room to talk privately. When we entered, I immediately noticed the large picture of L. Ron Hubbard on the wall. We sat down and genuinely had a nice talk. I told him about how I was unhappy about where my life was going. I told him about how I wanted to leave, plus all the trouble I was having at work. He seemed genuinely concerned for me, and I felt like he wanted to help. After a while of talking, I agreed to do the personality test. He gave me the test and left the room, saying to give the test to the receptionist after I had finished. 2 hours later, I finished it. Not joking, that's really how long it took. It was around 500 questions about anything and everything. I handed it to the receptionist. She told me it would take some time to process. In the meantime, Alan had told her to take me to their private cinema to show me a film. I thought it was just going to be some old room in the back with a TV on the wall, but no. They did indeed have a private cinema. They could seat around 50 people and had a large screen in the very front. It did feel a bit weird just being by myself in a cinema owned by Scientology, but I bet this hasn't happened to many people. Or maybe it has. Anyway, I sat down and they played me the film. It was about 30 minutes long and consisted of a narrator explaining those strange feelings you sometimes get, with some mediocre acting following along. I remember a section about how much you doubt yourself, knowing you have locked a door but going back to check multiple times. At one point, the film showed how a past event that happened to your mother while she was pregnant with you could affect your life in a negative way. I also vaguely remember something about rotten eggs and how much an event involving them can hurt you. I know it sounds absurd, but in some ways the film really made sense to me. When the film was done, I was taken to Alan's office and he told me my results. He told me I was extremely depressed, one of the most unmotivated people he had ever met, lacking cognitive thinking, and that I was a waste of talent. Now this made me very upset, but Alan said he could help me. He gave me about 4 books and a DVD. He told me to read the books and watch the film before my course. I asked, what course? Alan told me he'd signed me up to do a course at the center. He convinced me that if I didn't do this course, that my life would soon spiral out of control. He made me hand over quite a lot of money for the course, and I would receive an email about the course, which was in a month's time. I left the center, ran home, and immediately started reading the books I was given. This happened all over the course of one weekend. I had basically locked myself in my room and did nothing but read and reread those books and watch the DVD over and over again. Over the next week, I began taking notes about myself and my family. I emailed Alan with questions and concerns. I started resenting my mother for my life. I began to think that she was the problem, that everything bad that happened to me was a result of her. I started to treat her badly, swearing at her, and I did the best I could to ignore her. When I emailed Alan about my mother, he told me that she was a catalyst for my problems, and that maybe I should consider disconnecting from her. And I took that bullshit seriously. I made plans to totally leave her out of my life. A week before my course, I developed some kind of God complex towards everyone around me. What I read in those books told me what I could become. I saw everyone in my family as below me. I really became quite a spiteful person. Just days before my course, I was confronted by my mother and father. They said they were concerned about me and they searched my room. My dad took out all of my Scientology books and the DVD. I was outraged. I screamed and cursed at my parents. I said horribly wicked things to them. I told them how I was going to leave them and how I never wanted to see them again. Hours of arguing back and forth, tears and crying. However, in the end, they did convince me that this church was a bad place. They said, if I was so miserable at work, I should have told them, and that was true. To this day, I can't believe I didn't say anything to them. Instead, I went to Scientology. That night, after arguing had stopped, they sat me down and confronted me. I really couldn't believe it. After the way I had treated them for the past 3 weeks, they still cared for me. The next day, I emailed Alan and told him I would not be coming back to the church. He quickly got back to me asking why, asking if it was my family and if I was being forced not to go. However, I ignored him. The emails I received in the next few weeks were maddening. He told me stuff like, I should leave my family now and I could stay at the church. He tried to convince me that it was all because of my mother. He even emailed me to say something along the lines of, he won't be surprised if he reads in the papers that I was found dead by suicide. I'm very sure he crossed a line there, but I just kept ignoring him. The strangest email I got was in all binary code. I used a binary code translator, but it all came back as mixed up letters and numbers. None of it made sense. I eventually blocked him. However, it still hasn't stopped. 2 or 3 times a year I will get an email from the church. It's either asking how I am or asking about my family. When I get them, I immediately block the email address, but they just keep coming. It's always someone new, saying they heard about my case and they were worried about me. The only reason I'm writing this is because I just got one the other day, and I thought it would make a good warning. Please, I beg you, do not go to the Church of Scientology Center. If they can make me into a spitefully degenerate in just a few hours, then what could they do to a person in a few months or a year? Story number 2. I am a 19-year-old male. My family and I moved to this new house in March of 2017. I was really excited because this house was huge and had a nice, beautiful garden with a pool and a hot tub. I'm not bragging about this information, but it will be important later. When we moved in, the real estate agent told my parents and me that there has been stories of home invasions on our street, and that our house and our neighbor's house were the only ones which haven't been broken into yet. The first weird event started happening in May of 2017. My room is at the patio, so when I look out my window I can see the patio and the hot tub. At first I could hear the gate of our garden being opened at night. That was continuing for the next 10 weeks. Sometimes we would go outside in the morning, and all the lamps would be bashed in. Yes, 10 weeks. It's like this property is haunted by a poltergeist, since we haven't seen anybody doing these things. At first we thought that some burglars are opening our garden gate at night, because every morning my parents open the patio door, so our dog can go outside and pee. So I guess the burglars were hoping that our dog would run off, so they would have easier access to our home. All these incidents made me and my mother feel very unsafe in our own home. All of a sudden it stopped, so we thought that the person or people whoever did this had moved on or had gotten bored. 5 months went by and everything started all over again, but much worse. In November, I woke up to footsteps outside my window. I opened my eyes and I wished I hadn't done that. What I saw was a 6'3" man standing outside my window and watching me while I was asleep. He looked so old yet so young. He had this young face, but his haircut made him look 25 years older. At least that's what I could see in the dark. I was frozen, I couldn't move, so we just looked at each other in the eyes for what felt like an eternity. Suddenly he ran off, so I took my chance and ran to my parents' room and told them what was happening. My dad grabbed his gun, which he is keeping at home now, because he is a police officer. He ran outside but couldn't find the man, only a broken gate. The police came but couldn't do much, so they left rather quickly. 2 months later, I woke up to splashing sounds. I got up and looked outside my window. I noticed that the sound was coming from the pool, but I couldn't see it due to the trees blocking my view. I shrugged it off because I thought there was just something wrong with the pump, which wasn't a rare thing, so I went back to bed. I had a hard time falling asleep since the sound grew louder and more intense. I got up and went into the living room, which allows me to see the entire garden. When I looked outside, I got the same feeling which I had 2 months prior, when I spotted the guy outside my window again. Anyway, I looked outside and saw the same man standing in our pool, draining our pool with a small cup. And I mean it how I said it. He was standing in our pool with the cup, throwing the water on the grass. He had this dead stare in his eyes, like he didn't even know what he was doing. He noticed me watching him and just smiled at me, while diving down, like that's his way to escape. I woke up my dad, who immediately called the police. They left as fast as they came since they didn't find anything but an empty pool. They said he was probably homeless and was just washing himself, but I am certain he was not just washing himself. It is now August of 2018. I noticed some weird cars parked in front of our house lately, and if someone would spot them, they would drive off. My parents left me alone this weekend since it's my uncle's birthday. I didn't want to come along, so I decided to stay at home alone. I got bored all alone, so I called a couple of my friends to come and hang out at my place. They came around 7 p.m. We started drinking some wine and listening to music. Time passed and it was 11 p.m. when we heard someone knocking at the window of our living room. I thought I was imagining the knocks, but my friends looked at me like they were about to ask if I was expecting someone. I turned off the music to listen, but all we heard was silence. I turned on the patio lights when a girlfriend of mine yelled, "Hey, there's someone running!" I didn't see someone but heard the gate slam shut. I was worried but decided not to call the police since they couldn't do anything anyway. I was really glad that my friends drank something and had to crash at my place, so I wouldn't be alone that night. Today is Saturday and my friends left at around 5 p.m. I was in my room when I heard something fall in my bathroom, so I got up to see what it was. When I walked towards the bathroom, I was dying inside, when I could see a person right behind the door. The person didn't notice that I spotted him, so I walked back in my room to get my phone to call the police and my parents. I wanted to go down to the den because my lock on my door was broken. When I passed the bathroom, I saw that the person was still there, so I opened up my camera and took a picture as proof for my family and friends. Here is the image. When I took the photo, my dumbass didn't think about the flash, so when I took the pic, the light illuminated the entire bathroom and the door slammed shut. I thought this was my chance to abandon the house completely, so I ran right out of the house and called the police. They arrived within 10 minutes. They went inside and came out with the same man who was terrorizing me and my family for over a year and a half now. The police said he was sitting in our bathtub just staring at the drain. He was saying, "The cult elderly will eliminate you. The cult elderly will eliminate you." Right now I'm sitting here in my room writing this story and worrying about the cult he was talking about. Are the suspicious cars in front of my house part of the cult? Or was he just an insane man? This entire event doesn't make any sense to me, and I don't know what is yet to come from my family. Number 1. Children of God, initially called Teens for Christ. Children of God was founded in 1968 by rogue preacher David Berg in Huntington Beach, California. Attracting young runaways and hippies, Berg preached a kind of worship that combined the ways of Jesus Christ with the free love movement of the 60s. Group living, zealous proselytizing, and isolated communes were all pillars of the Children of God Church. Members who amounted to 15,000 people across the world at its peak didn't work and children didn't go to school. The Children of God didn't believe in the nuclear family, so children were grouped together and lived separately from their parents. In the late 1970s, Children of God became notorious for sexual practices that one of Berg's own daughters later described as religious prostitution. Berg coined the term flirty fishing, a sexual practice in which women allegedly have sex with men to bring them into the cult. Berg promoted and encouraged the sexualization of children with the COG community. As Berg manipulated the COG family with his sadistic practices, members started leaving the community, including the families of actors Joaquin Phoenix and Rose McGowan, who both grew up in the Children of God communes. Former Children of God members began coming forward in the early 1990s, describing an environment that permitted and encouraged the physical and sexual abuse of children. Rick Dupé appeared on a talk show in 1993 and revealed that he'd been asked to commit awful acts. Dupé later committed suicide, like many other members of the group, including Berg's son Ricky Rodriguez, who was sexually abused throughout his life by his father and the group. Although Berg died in 1994, while under FBI investigation, the Children of God cult continued to exist and now goes by the name Family International, although the group claims that the horrific practices are a thing of the past. Number 2. Church of the Lamb of God. Dubbed by the media as the Mormon Manson, the Church of the Lamb of God was started by Ervil LeBaron in Chihuahua, Mexico, after he clashed and left his brother Joel's sect. LeBaron convinced his followers that he received direct instructions from God, which included using an abandoned Mormon doctrine, blood atonement, that allows the killing of sinners to cleanse them of evil. LeBaron Welcome to Sinful's Horror Stories. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe now for future content. If you want to have your story featured on an upcoming video, email it to thesinfulsavant@gmail.com. I will have a link to my email in the description box below as well. Today's video features the scariest cult stories of all time. Sit back, relax, stay sinful. Number 1. Children of God, initially called Teens for Christ. Children of God was founded in 1968 by rogue preacher David Berg in Huntington Beach, California. Attracting young runaways and hippies, Berg preached a kind of worship that combined the ways of Jesus Christ with the free love movement of the 60s. Group living, zealous proselytizing, and isolated communes were all pillars of the Children of God Church. Members who amounted to 15,000 people across the world at its peak didn't work and children didn't go to school. The Children of God didn't believe in the nuclear family, so children were grouped together and lived separately from their parents. In the late 1970s, Children of God became notorious for sexual practices that one of Berg's own daughters later described as religious prostitution. Berg coined the term flirty fishing, a sexual practice in which women allegedly have sex with men to bring them into the cult. Berg promoted and encouraged the sexualization of children with the COG community. As Berg manipulated the COG family with his sadistic practices, members started leaving the community, including the families of actors Joaquin Phoenix and Rose McGowan, who both grew up in the Children of God communes. Former Children of God members began coming forward in the early 1990s, describing an environment that permitted and encouraged the physical and sexual abuse of children. Rick Dupé appeared on a talk show in 1993 and revealed that he'd been asked to commit awful acts. Dupé later committed suicide, like many other members of the group, including Berg's son Ricky Rodriguez, who was sexually abused throughout his life by his father and the group. Although Berg died in 1994, while under FBI investigation, the Children of God cult continued to exist and now goes by the name Family International, although the group claims that the horrific practices are a thing of the past. Number 2. Church of the Lamb of God. Dubbed by the media as the Mormon Manson, the Church of the Lamb of God was started by Ervil LeBaron in Chihuahua, Mexico, after he clashed and left his brother Joel's sect. LeBaron convinced his followers that he received direct instructions from God, which included using an abandoned Mormon doctrine, blood atonement, that allows the killing of sinners to cleanse them of evil. LeBaron had 51 children with 13 different wives, and over 2 decades amassed hundreds of followers, who allegedly murdered more than 20 people on the behalf of LeBaron at his orders. Mexico authorities arrested LeBaron in 1979 and handed him over to the FBI, where he was charged for the murder of another polygamous sect leader and jailed for life in Utah. Although LeBaron died in prison in 1981, his reign of terror continued until the 1990s, as he left behind a hit list of people he believed were traitors. Number 3. The Manson Family. You don't need to know much about true crime to know the name Charles Manson, which almost 50 years ago after his heinous acts is still synonymous with cult leader. Manson started his group in San Francisco in 1967, and later that year moved to Los Angeles, where he tried and failed to establish himself as a musician. Manson became obsessed with the Beatles' song Helter Skelter and started using the term to describe a race war he believed would usher in the apocalypse. And in August of 1969, he sent a group of his followers to a house in Benedict Canyon and told them to kill everyone inside. The victims included actress Sharon Tate, then married to Roman Polanski, and celebrity hairdresser Jay Sebring. The next night, Manson's followers murdered Rosemary and Lino LaBlanca at their home in Los Feliz. Some people believe Manson ordered the murders because he thought it would kickstart his Helter Skelter concept, while others think he believed the Tate house still belonged to a music producer who'd refused to give him a record deal. Still, others claim that the murders were the Manson family's attempt at copycat murders, designed to get their friend out of jail. No matter the motive, though, commentators at the time saw the murders as the official end of the 1960s culture of free love. Number 4. People's Temple. In the 1950s, Indiana native Jim Jones founded the church that he claimed promoted socialism and equality, with religious elements of Christianity. Initially, he was a little more than a charismatic leader who faked faith healings by having audience plants pull chicken livers out of congregants' mouths, but as the years progressed, he demanded more and more of his followers. In the early 1970s, Jones moved his group to California and set them up in a commune-like settlement in Redwood Valley. Jones eventually came to believe that nuclear war was imminent and moved his followers again to the South American country of Guyana, which he thought would be outside the potential danger zone. The group lived there for several years as a People's Temple agricultural project, but after former members started speaking out against the church, San Francisco Congressman Leo Ryan decided to travel to Jonestown to investigate claims of abuse. Temple security guards opened fire on Ryan's group, and back at the settlement, Jones ordered his followers to drink a cyanide-laced beverage. This is where the phrase "drinking the Kool-Aid" originates. A total of 918 people died in the incident, and until 9/11, it was the largest loss of American civilian life in history. Number 5. Heaven's Gate. Founded by Marshall Applewhite and Bonnie Nettles in the 1970s. Heaven's Gate was an ascetic cult that had a complicated belief system involving aliens, spaceships, and an imminent recycling of the Earth. After Nettles died in 1985, Applewhite took the group to even further extremes, and in 1997 he began claiming that a spacecraft was following the Hale-Bopp comet. This spacecraft would carry the Heaven's Gate members to the next level of existence. While living in a rented home in San Diego, Applewhite and 38 followers died by suicide by taking phenobarbital mixed with applesauce. They all wore the same uniform and Nike shoes and had $5.75 in their pockets. As of today, the Heaven's Gate website still exists and is maintained by 2 of the group's followers. Number 6. Order of the Solar Temple. Founded in Switzerland in 1984, the Order of the Solar Temple traced its roots to the medieval Knights Templar, but also thought the world would end in the 1990s. Things took a turn in 1994 when OST leader Joseph DeMambro reportedly ordered the murder of an infant in Quebec. Later that year, more than 50 members of the group were murdered or died by suicide, and the group's buildings were destroyed by fire. Additional members died by suicide in 1995 and 1997. Number 7. Branch Davidians. The Branch Davidians broke off from the Davidian Seventh-day Adventists in 1955, but didn't make headlines until the infamous Waco siege of 1993. In 1981, David Koresh, born Vernon Howell, took over the group, which was headquartered at the commune called Mount Carmel. After allegations of child abuse within the commune, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives attempted to raid Mount Carmel, but a gun battle erupted that killed 10 people. The FBI then launched a siege that lasted for 51 days and ended with the compound being destroyed by fire. Koresh was killed along with 76 others. A governmental investigation later concluded that the Branch Davidians had started the fires themselves.